Kitano Takeshi is probably the most recognizable Japanese person on earth. Known for his comedy, films, and writing, he's a living legend. Let's take a look at how he came to be. Takeshi grew up in Adachi, with 2 older brothers and an older sister in post-war Japan. Needless to say, times were tough. His father, Kikujiro, supported his family through a number of odd jobs. However, at home he was a problem drinker and spent a lot of his earnings on drink. And for a time, he walked out on his family. His leaving was met with mixed feelings. Takeshi's mother, Saki, had always put a huge emphasis on her children's education, and she spent the little money she had on books and schooling for her kids. Saki lost her family in infancy, and she lived as a servant before her arranged marriage to Kikujiro. She knew the key to escaping poverty was a good education, which is why she didn't want her kids working. However, the burden of being a single mother was too much to bear alone. Takeshi's eldest brother took on the responsibility of being the head of the household, and he helped support the family financially. Young Takeshi loved being the center of attention, and he dreamed of being someone big. He played baseball and did boxing later, though once his grades started to slip, his mother KO'd his boxing dreams. Takeshi was particularly good at math and art, and in high school he dreamed of becoming an engineer for a big automotive company. Takeshi was accepted to the prestigious Meiji University to pursue that dream. This was during the 1960s, and while Japan didn't really have a flower power hippie movement, Takeshi was a kind of futan. Takeshi had gotten into French existentialism, art, and literature. He spent a lot of his time reading up on it. He also got into jazz and spent a lot of his time in Shinjuku. During his time in university, Takeshi became very conscious of his mortality. He thought, how could I die without doing something I really want to do? Though he himself didn't know what he wanted to do. He decided to drop out, much to the disappointment of his mother. Over the next few years, he worked numerous odd jobs: waiter, salesman, supermarket clerk, taxi driver. He even tried to get his old dream back and apply to an automotive company, but was of course rejected. His decision of free will had caused him to live a very limited life. He was a poor nobody working dead-end job after dead-end job, and Takeshi had grown sick and tired of being sick and tired. Nationally, Japan was seeing a new wave of comedians come front and center, and Takeshi was becoming more and more attracted to the limelight of comedy. In 1972, he decided to devote everything he had to make it as a comedian. He moved to Asakusa, the entertainment district in Tokyo. He'd spend his days going up and down the street searching for comedy theaters for a comedian to take him as an apprentice, which was how it was done back then, but no one accepted him. One day, he stumbled upon a different kind of theater. It was basically a strip club, but they had a stand-up comedian, Fukami Senzaburo. Takeshi loved his comedy and hoped to become his apprentice. The theater agreed on the condition he would first start work as the elevator operator. After a couple of months of paying his dues, his apprenticeship began. Fukami wasn't particularly keen on having an apprentice, but was won over by Takeshi's earnestness. And soon after, Fukami had taught him everything he knew about comedy. An opportunity presented itself when a senior comedian resigned and Takeshi was more than ready to take his spot as MC. Takeshi was now a big fish in a small pond, and he was thinking about his next step. Another comedian at the theater, Kiyoshi, wanted to team up with him and take their act to Tokyo. Takeshi was hesitant at first, mostly because he thought abandoning his master and the theater would be an act of disloyalty. But the thought of being stuck in the same place for the rest of his life scared him, and he joined Kiyoshi and abruptly left the theater. They joined a talent agency and worked under Columbia Toplight, and were given a new duo name. Despite having a proper talent agency, they were actually making less than they were before, and they weren't landing many gigs. The gigs they did land were at sleazy nightclubs. Takeshi grew extremely frustrated and began showing up to rehearsals drunk, or not at all. He would even yell at the audience if they didn't laugh. The problem, in Takeshi's eyes, was that Kiyoshi's joke writing just wasn't that funny, and they disbanded for a time. During their time apart, Takeshi gained a lot of inspiration from Shimada Yoshichi. His fast-paced, vulgar manzai was exactly what Takeshi wanted to do. Takeshi started writing new material and reunited with Kiyoshi. This time they'd call their duo 2-Beat, and they'd be known as Beat Takeshi and Beat Kiyoshi. Their new style of comedy, which was mostly Takeshi monologuing with Kiyoshi interjecting retorts, would go on to influence numerous comedians. And their rise to popularity helped manzai become a cultural phenomenon later in the 80s. A lot happened to Takeshi in his private life during 2-Beat's rise to fame. He married another comedian, Mikiko, and had 2 kids. His father, Kikujiro, died, and despite their falling out, his family was there on his deathbed. In an interview, Takeshi said his father's last words were, "I'm sorry." Tragedy would once again strike when his former master Fukami died in a house fire. Takeshi took his death especially hard. Fukami was the man who got his foot in the door and helped him grow as a comedian. He deeply regretted not going back to see Fukami after he had made it in showbiz. It was around this time Takeshi started acting, writing, and hosting his own shows. He was showing a darker side to him, and he took the role of a serial killer, Kiyoshi Okubo, for a TBS documentary. This was also the same year Takeshi starred in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, as a sergeant in a Japanese prisoner of war camp. Takeshi had begun taking his career in a very different direction, and though his duo 2-Beat didn't formally disband, they both began working separately. I'd like to note that Beat Kiyoshi didn't vanish into obscurity, and he found his own success. Takeshi, on the other hand, well, he was about to become a legend. 2-Beat had helped cause the manzai boom in the 80s, but now that Takeshi was solo, he was soaring to new heights. 1986 was a very eventful year for Takeshi. He imagined the iconic Takeshi's Castle. The physical challenges and absurdity made it a smash hit not just in Japan, but around the world. Its wide appeal caught the eyes of many who had never been interested in Japanese entertainment. And in doing so, Takeshi's Castle would help contribute to how the world saw Japan. Well, for game shows at least. Another big event was the release of his video game, Takeshi's Challenge. Infamously known as one of the worst games of all time. I won't go into detail explaining Takeshi's sadistic level of cryptic game design. Instead, I'd like to say Takeshi's Challenge did one thing amazingly well, and that is, he designed a game people wanted to talk about. I can only imagine what playing this game must have been like before the internet. It's said the game is the result of developers interviewing a drunk Takeshi for ideas. And considering the in-game events, it sounds plausible. Though in reality, they had a number of interviews. One developer in particular scheduled numerous meetings with Takeshi and filled a notebook with his ideas. Most of them, though, were impossible due to hardware limitations or inappropriateness. Anyway, a day before the game's launch, Takeshi was involved in a scandal with Friday, a celebrity tabloid. Friday had already caused problems for Takeshi's family in the past. They tracked down what elementary school his daughter was about to enter and sent a photographer to hound her and his wife during the entrance ceremony. The resulting hubbub caused the school to request the Kitanos to leave. Not just the ceremony, from actually enrolling in the school. This time, Friday was tracking a 21-year-old who they believed to be having an intimate relationship with Takeshi. Takeshi's infidelity was a common topic for gossip, and he was kind of a playboy in the 80s. In fact, Takeshi himself talked about visiting hostess clubs on live radio. Anyway, a Friday reporter tracked down the 21-year-old to her university. He would wait for her at the university's entrance. When she refused to talk, the reporter became more and more aggressive. He tried blocking her path, grabbing her, shoving a voice recorder in her face. And all this went on for 2 weeks. When Takeshi heard of what had happened, he was outraged. he called their office protesting their actions. Furious, Takeshi said, "How about I just go over there right now?" And at 3 a.m., December 9th, Takeshi gathered 11 members of his Gundan and took 3 taxis to the editorial department. His original plan was to mess up the place, spraying the office with fire extinguishers, which would have been the Western comedy equivalent to throwing cream pies everywhere. Takeshi had ordered his Gundan not to use violence. However, provocation from Friday's staff, particularly a remark from the editorial manager, caused Takeshi's raid to turn violent. Takeshi and crew dropped their fire extinguishers and started brawling. The editorial manager received a fractured rib before police arrived to arrest Takeshi and crew. They were charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and assault. They were sentenced to 6 months jail time and 2 years parole. Takeshi and crew took a 7-month hiatus from TV. Producers talked about banning Takeshi from ever returning from TV, but his programs were just too popular to cancel. In addition to that, publicly there was a lot of sympathy for Takeshi, and he made a triumphant return to TV in fall of 1987. Takeshi's 7-month hiatus actually proved beneficial for him. He spent his time reading and studying, improving his general knowledge and knowledge of the entertainment industry. Most notably, he resigned from Ota Pro and started his own talent agency, Office Kitano. In his hiatus, he began to see a bigger vision of himself, and soon a chance happening would help him realize his true passion. Interesting side note, there isn't a single photograph of Takeshi's raid. As luck would have it, all of Friday's cameramen were out at the time, and there wasn't a camera in the entire building. Sometime after the Friday incident had blown over, Takeshi received the offer for Violent Cop. Originally meant to be a comedy, differences between Takeshi and the director had caused the director to leave, and Takeshi was given the offer to take his place. This was his chance to finally play a serious role. Takeshi transformed the script to a dark, gritty drama. The movie did well, and critics recognized Takeshi's directing and acting talent. The general public of Japan, though, well, beat Takeshi's comedic image was just too strong, and it deflated the serious atmosphere. In his next movie, Boiling Point, Takeshi upped the violence. He played a psychotic Yakuza member. Whoa. However, the film was a flop at the box office. The next year, he released A Scene at the Sea. A very different film from his previous two. It was about a deaf garbage collector who finds a broken surfboard and learns to surf. It did better at the box office and received several awards. This was also the first film Takeshi worked with Joe Hisaishi. If you don't know Joe, but like Japanese stuff, chances are you've already heard his work. For his next film, he returned to Shochiku to produce a bigger budgeted film, Sanatine. Takeshi plays a Yakuza tired of his life of crime and is sent to Okinawa to settle a dispute between 2 crime families. It's a masterpiece. Takeshi found the perfect balance of captivating storytelling with moments of intense violence. This would also be his first movie screened at Cannes. Takeshi had put his very soul into the movie, and after all his hard work, it was still a commercial failure in Japan. The public still didn't recognize Takeshi as anything more than a comedian. Takeshi began working on his next movie, Getting Any. The first movie directed by his alternate personality beat Takeshi. It was a silly movie that poked fun at Japanese comedy itself. This was a movie the Japanese public had expected from him, but it certainly wasn't the kind of movie Takeshi wanted to keep making. Takeshi was still performing comedy on TV with a bright smile, but behind closed doors with his Gundan, He had become self-destructive. When he was drunk, he'd talk about death. He talked about it so much it frightened the Gundan. And one night, in 1994, after some heavy drinking, Takeshi got on his scooter and drove into a barricade, severely injuring him and paralyzing the right side of his face. Takeshi later stated it was an unconscious suicide attempt. Perhaps it was the frustration of his films not being taken seriously in Japan, or his extreme schedule, or his marital struggles. But this crash was a wake-up call. His near-death experience gave him a renewed outlook on life, and he didn't want to waste any more time. He got right back into filmmaking. His next movie, Kids Return. Following the story of two high school dropouts, one who becomes a boxer and the other a yakuza, this was Takeshi's first successful film in Japan. The next year, Takeshi released Hanabi, and wow! Takeshi returns to his role as an ex-violent cop with a terminally ill wife. I don't want to spoil the story, but Takeshi had made another masterpiece. Hanabi was highly acclaimed internationally, and Takeshi won the Golden Lion. With this accomplishment, Japan could no longer ignore Takeshi's talent as a filmmaker. In addition to that, Western film distributors became very interested in Takeshi's movies. And after 7 movies done in 8 years, Takeshi had finally proven to the world he was more than a comedian. Takeshi is in his 70s now. He continued making movies till 2017. In 2018, he left the company he started, Office Kitano, but he still has a very strong TV presence. In an interview, he was asked what he wants to do now, and that's write. He spends most of his time writing when he's not on TV. And I guess in the near future, Takeshi will receive a major literary award in Japan. Because this man's determination and creativity is phenomenal.